Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're here today with myself and four wonderful panelists who are going to have a conversation regarding caregiving. We'll start by me introducing myself, and I'll introduce the panel, and we'll jump right into a conversation that's going to really share with you our experiences as caregivers. We have a variety of people with us speaking today who are caregivers for donors, recipients, people who underwent liver transplants, received liver transplants, as well as folks who donated part of their liver or kidney to somebody, and those who've received kidneys. So definitely a wide variety of stories and experiences. We're going to share with you some of the good, some of the positives, some of the challenges, and hopefully offer some words of wisdom and advice to those who might be on their own caregiving journey. So welcome. My name is Heather Lennon. I work at the Center for Living Organ Donation here at Toronto General. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator, which means that I provide education, outreach, as well as support to families, caregivers, living donors, who might be going through the journey either as a donor or as a recipient. But in addition to that, I was also a caregiver for a patient here at Toronto General. My husband was a patient in the heart transplant program here probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And during my journey with him, I learned a lot of what it really takes to support somebody who's going through this transplant journey. So I'll turn it over to my wonderful panel colleagues and have them introduce themselves and just tell a little bit about their story. So I think I'll flip it over. Leslie, would you like to start and tell us a little bit about your caregiving journey?
Sure. Well, my name's Leslie Alvarez, and I'm a mother of 4 amazing children, 2 of whom are part of this transplant story. My daughter Danielle donated roughly 70% of her liver to her sister Alicia as part of the journey through PSC, which Alicia had, which is primary sclerosing cholangitis, and it was a sort of degenerative liver disease that needed transplantation. And I journeyed with her through over the past 10 years with this illness, and resulting in the transplant in January of this year.
So thanks, Leslie. You're the one on the panel. I'm dubbing you my dual caregiver because you were caring for not just the recipient but the donor as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So looking forward to hearing how you managed to navigate. I'm sure very competing duties of both.
Right. Yes.
I'll switch it over to Mike. We'll stick with the liver and then we'll move to the kidney. And I think, Mike, you have a bit of a PSC story as well.
Exactly. My name is Mike Pierce. I was the primary caregiver for my wife, who was also diagnosed with PSC about 4 years ago. And again, as Leslie said, it's a metabolic disease, liver disease that basically requires an endpoint of a transplant. And we lived through the living donation process, came out on the positive end of it. It was a long journey and lots of challenges, but it has ended well.
And when did Diane receive, Mike? Not that.
Diane received on April the 29th, so almost exactly 5 months ago. And I should say, I take back the word "and" because I don't think it ever really ends. There are surprises that pop out.
Very true.
I think, and probably will continue to do so through our lives, maybe less frequently. But she was recently hospitalized again with a pretty serious infection, but she's been treated and was released after 3 days. But I think it probably takes a considerable amount of time to get the medications, the immunosuppressants and the steroids balanced. And so it continues to be a challenge, but she's living and healthy and enjoying her life.
Good to hear. Very good to hear. Perfect. We'll switch gears a little now, and we'll pop over to our kidney caregivers. So DeRoy, I believe your wife has had her transplant now for a couple years. Is that right?
That is correct. She had her transplant back in March of 2018. I am her caregiver also too. It was a very strenuous journey, definitely, but it ended up well at the end. Jean's a very strong woman. I took strength from her to help her recover from her kidney surgery. A lot of prayers, a lot of family helped out, but primarily it was a lot of me and my daughter. My daughter's like her doctor, always giving her medicine. I just there to make sure she's comfortable. It was a very trying experience, but it ended up good in the end.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And last but not least, Francesco, you, like Leslie, was providing care for your partner on the donor side. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
So I guess just a quick, summary. So my name is Francesco, and my connection to the transplant is through my partner, who coincidentally happens to work for UHN. And he donated his kidney through the non-direct parent exchange, which was back in March of 2013. His initial interest stemmed from wanting to, surprise a friend who was also a coworker at the time, whose son needed a kidney. And good news was that he ended up getting a donor before Trevor's testing was complete. But Trevor decided to continue with donating a kidney and did it anonymously.
Yeah, thank you. So as you can see, as I mentioned in the introduction, we have a wide variety of experiences. We have some folks on the panel who've, are just in the beginning stages post-transplant. Leslie and Michael, just this year, having their loved ones receive kidneys, and then, or livers rather. And then Francesco, obviously is the oldest veteran here on the panel with 7 years under your belt of caregiving, and then DeRoy kind of there in the middle. So I think it's important for people to know that while we're talking about transplant and everybody involved in your stories has either donated now or been transplanted, what was like life before the transplant? I know some of us, Leslie had said her daughter was ill for about 10 years prior to the transplant. I know Mike's wife was also ill for a number of years, and I believe Janine was receiving dialysis for quite some time. So maybe DeRoy, we'll start with you, and you can tell us a little bit about what that was like for you, Janine going through the dialysis, because I think, a lot of people don't really understand or grasp the real, the real life, everyday in and out situation of what it's like for these people who are pretty ill.
Yeah, definitely. She was going about 3 times a week down to Toronto General. She's there for 3 or 4 hours at a time. She'd bring her laptop with her to do work at the same time. It was a very scary process for me, because I'm just watching. I can't do anything. I can just watch and support, rub her back, talk to her on the phone, comfort her the whole time. But and then it got to the point she did it at home, because she had to go to work the next day. She did home dialysis, and I know I couldn't do it. Just watching she was doing how she would get everything set, all the bags set up on the pole, make sure the solution goes through her body and come back the other bag. It was just it was very stressful watching, but I couldn't show her that. I had to learn all strong too, right? Because she was strong. I can't be weak or sad and make her feel depressed or hopeless, right? So end of the day, I give Jane so much respect and credit to how strong she was through this whole process. There's times I want to cry, I want to walk away. I give her a little joke to make sure, let her know I'm okay. But deep down, I was very stressed. But she was very strong. Again, it's amazing how strong your spouse is. right? I watched her, we grew closer from me watching her go through this whole process of dialysis, finally getting a donor, going through surgery. So I give her a lot of respect.
One tough lady.
Definitely, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize with the home dialysis, you know, you guys probably had to set up a whole room in your house because of all the equipment. There's medical supplies being dropped off to you, the bag,
Yes.
the solution.
Yes.
This is a lot. This is a huge undertaking to do this.
Yes. Yeah, definitely, for sure. We had different boxes coming like every 2.5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, same time she was doing her dialysis at home, and then it just watching the whole process. It makes you think, how could one person be so strong, right? I give her so much respect for what she was doing, for sure.
Absolutely. And what about you guys on the liver side, Mike or Leslie? I know with liver we don't have a machine like dialysis, but there's a lot of other pieces that go when a person is experiencing liver disease. You know, you obviously see them turn jaundiced, or they have the the itchy skin, and then they have the sometimes the HE where the toxins in the brain build up, and that can be very scary to see your loved one not be really in control. How was that for you to watch your loved one battle liver disease for a number of years, for both of you actually?
Well, for me, my daughter was very young when she was diagnosed. So Alicia was 14 years old when she got PSC. And so just at the time when she should be a teenager and going out and enjoying, life with her friends, all of a sudden the switch was flipped, and we found ourselves, with multiple hospital visits and so on. So it took about 4 months to diagnose, because she actually got another illness as well, ulcerative colitis. It came as a cluster with it. So the colitis was diagnosed first, and then the PSC after. So it was very difficult as a mother to see your 14-year-old, struggle and suffer. And she definitely went through a stage where she was sort of angry at the world, I would say, sort of why me kind of thing. Why did this happen to me? But it lasted a very short time. And I'm extremely proud of her. I listened to what DeRoy was saying, and yes, she turned out to be one very tough teenager, and now an adult of 23. She was 23 when she was transplanted. And so, she went from that to, why not me? I think there was a reason why I got this. And I think for me, faith played a huge part in it. And as she sort of grew in her faith, she also grew in the way she looked at it differently. And she saw it as a reason to grow closer in faith. But it was hard. She was hospitalized twice in 2016 with an episode of cholangitis, which is the inflammation. And she was quite severely jaundiced from 2016 onwards. So you could definitely see it in her eyes and on her skin. And, the itching as well was huge for her. But she really just faced it with calmness and a positive outlook. After that initial spurt, for about a year or a year and a half, where she was a little bit, sort of upset at the world, if you like, she really went on to just grow in strength with it. And she was one very tough lady. And I also, like DeRoy said, I also drew my strength from that, because when I could see how positive she was being, and how accepting, if you like, of her situation, then there was no reason for me to be anything else other than that. So I really have to say that she inspired me. And then later on, when my older daughter, Danielle, became her donor, I was then doubly inspired, because now here was a sister who wanted to make a really huge difference for her sister. I remember her saying, I don't want it to be anybody else but me. Because I have four children. So Alicia has 3 sisters who could potentially put in an application. I remember Danielle saying, I want it to be me. So, you know, and she's only 2 years older than her. So she was 25 when she was transplanted, when she became her donor, her sister's donor. So basically at 25 and 23, these girls went in for a huge surgery, you know, and huge life-changing event, really. And it's turned out to be so positive for them.
Yeah, really determined, resilient, all those things you think of when you think of strength.
Absolutely.
They must have got it from their mom.
Well, I'd like to say so, but I think I'm really growing in strength from them. So
Exactly, it goes both ways.
yeah.
And for Mike, I know you and Diane were kind of on the other end of the spectrum. While Leslie's daughter found out about her illness so young, you and Diane were towards retirement years when this all kind of happened.
Yes, I mean, symptomatically, what Leslie just said, a lot of the symptoms are similar. So the itching, which is, you know, is terrible. It can be extreme at some points. Jaundice, her eye color is very yellow. But I think the one difference were the number of cases of HE, hepatic encephalopathy, that she went through, which is, you know, brain infection, and they were frightening. I said that I'd sleep with one eye open because she, another symptom is loss of sleep. So she would sleep during the day and then be up half the night, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night and not know where she was and where she was, and it was a frightening time, and almost certainly like a type of dementia. At one point, she couldn't remember the names of our children, of our two daughters and our granddaughter. And so it was, I think that was the worst. But as symptoms go, I think you can look at a lot of other diseases where the pain is horrific. There really is no pain. It's just a culmination of all of these symptoms that have to be managed and are things that you live with. I think the hardest was the HE. There were, you know, a number of times we had to, you know, she had to be hospitalized for it, and obviously on antibiotics to clear up whatever infection she had. And I quite honestly, I was relieved to have her in hospital at those times, even as much as she wanted to come home. But it was remarkable how quickly she would recover and be cognitively fine again. But I think that that was the worst of the symptoms. In terms of the age difference, yes, Diane battled non-ulcerative colitis for a number of years, 20 years, but not severe. At times she wasn't even medicated for it. And but I know they're correlated. I think that PSC isn't the cause is not determined, but certainly it seems to be correlated with the other bowel issues. And I think happening later in life, it opened our eyes to how important life still is. I think a lot of people would, I'm probably, a case in point. If I was going to donate an organ, I'd want to give it to a young person. But you learn pretty quickly how profound a matriarch is to her family and our daughters and her sisters and their children and their families. And I think Diane was sort of a pillar of multiple families, and how profound that was on her grandchildren, any future grandchildren that we're likely to have. And it pointed out that to me that a life is a life, and a child's life is no more valuable than an adult's life. And I think that Diane very much was the rock through all of this. It's funny, the theme is coming. The theme's coming through that she. There was very little. Woe is me! How could this happen? To me, it was. We're gonna battle this, and we're gonna win. And our family pulled together, and that's how I think we approached it. Once I think once the diagnosis was over and all the emotion was put behind, we all had a job to do. And the difference for us was that we had no family members that could donate. Diane's siblings, myself, were beyond the age of when you can donate, and our daughters had different healthcare issues that or simply weren't a match. But we took on a small media campaign. Thankfully, our eldest daughter, and her husband own a digital design company and branding company, and they were able to put together a terrific website, and we were featured in the local newspaper 2 or 3 times, and that built the story very, very quickly. And I think in total, Diane was maybe on the list for maybe 2 years maximum. I know people wait an awful lot longer than that, but in the end, you look back on it in retrospect, it now seems to have gone by pretty quickly and has ended well. But I caution in using the word ending, because I think it's a lifelong battle.
The next chapter.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think this is a great segue to bring Francesco into this conversation, because we had Leslie talk about her daughter being very young when she was diagnosed. Mike talked about a little bit, grandkids, the golden years, shall we to speak. But Francesco, you as a donor was very young when your partner decided to donate. Do you want to share with us a little bit about what that was like for you to be, a young man in your early 20s, still in university, just really beginning your life, really?
Sure. I mean, I feel like with Leslie, Michael, and DeRoy's perspectives as a caregiver of a recipient, I didn't experience that, right? So like I didn't experience any of the hardships that come with that. My partner was healthy. We didn't have any health issues, and so it wasn't even really a conversation at first. He kind of had experienced what his friend was going through as a mother of her son who needed a kidney, and she kind of would vent to him and confide in him, and I would hear pieces of it here and there. And I think most of his appointments were during his shifts. So I didn't even really know about them at first. And then when it finally became, I guess, more of a reality, I just turned 24. I just moved to the city, again, a couple years before that from a small town. So I didn't have anything to compare it to. And I keep saying that I think I experienced my version of cognitive dissonance, that I didn't really believe or understand what was happening. And also I say that as a 24-year-old, I'm very egocentric, and I didn't really, I think, have the empathy that, again, comes from experience, all the hardships that come with having someone who is a recipient. And so initially I was just numb to the matter. Like, I didn't have any negative or positive feelings towards it. His mom was concerned, his best friend was concerned, but every time he would talk to me about it, it was just, I think you'll be fine. And maybe part of that was reinforced with the fact that we knew a lot of the doctors and the nurses that would have been involved in the procedure. So I think I just maybe subconsciously had that confidence that he would be okay health-wise. But yeah, again, and I always say too, at the sake of sounding like a horrible human being, I was very numb to it all, and I didn't have the emotions that he, I think, wanted or deserved.
I think those are really good points. I think a lot of times numb is how we cope with things. And I think you coming out and saying that really speaks to a lot of caregivers' experiences. So I appreciate that whole aspect of, I don't want to sound like a horrible person, and you know, I was young as well when I was providing care. I had just turned 29 and had just got married and was, you know, ready to live happily ever after. And this, you know, this illness just came crashing down. And I remember thinking like, wow, you know, this is not what's supposed to happen. This is not how this is supposed to be. So I think a lot of people will resonate with those points that you're sitting there just going, like, shaking your head saying, what's going on here? So I appreciate that, and I think a lot of other people will as well. Honest, raw, and sometimes that's how it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think too, you can't really, another thing I always say is, like, how do you stop someone from saving a life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess for you sitting there, you know, Trevor was, you know, could have been donating to Mike's wife, Diane, could have been donating to Leslie's daughter, or, you know, DeRoy's wife. So, you know, how does that feel, you know, to know that all these people were saved because someone like Trevor stepped up, right?
Yeah.
That's a very, very good point. I used to think, you know, if I was the other donors, if I was the donor's spouse, I would be trying to probably convince her not to do it. And I'm thinking, well, if she's anything like my wife, once she's made up her mind, there's no changing it. And he said that exactly the same. So to your point, yeah, how do you talk someone out of saving a life? And I think instinctively we want to protect our partners, but I also know that you're probably never going to stop someone who is convinced that they're going to do it. So you might as well jump on the train and support, because they're determined. I think someone that does these kinds of things, that donates part of their you know, their organic being, they're very determined that they're going to do it.
I just want to add to that in my story, I actually always saw myself as the donor for my daughter, Alicia. So as I say, this journey was 10 years. So going back, I had done what I thought was my good research and found out that I was compatible with her. And of course, I knew I had to go through the process. So it came as a big, tremendous shock for me when I put in my application and thinking, well, I'm in great health. There's really nothing wrong with me. I'm within the age limit. Yes, I can be Alicia's donor. And I got a call from the Living Donor Transplant Unit, and they said, unfortunately, you can't be her donor because you're not her blood match. And I almost said, well, I think I did say, I'm sorry, can you please check it again? Because for 10 years, I've lived knowing that I'm her blood match. Now I'm suddenly hearing that she's a completely different blood group. So, you know, the determination was all on my side that I was going to do this. I was going to stay well and healthy. And yes, for sure, I would be her donor. But these things always, you know, have little curveball twists in them. And yeah, and so all of a sudden, there was not a chance. And this is where my eldest daughter stepped up and very quietly. So going to what Francesca was saying, she put in her application as well without telling us. And she told us after she'd been through some of the process. And it was a combination of, you know, wanting to wait until she had better news to tell us before she got our hopes up high. But we didn't actually know that she had put in her application. So the determination goes every which way, really. It goes from, you know, in my case, from the mothers and, you know, onto the daughter, because we were just determined that somehow Alicia would, you know, feel better soon and get what she really needed. And living donation seemed the most positive and hopeful way to achieve this in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And DeRoy, I think you guys are in a similar situation as well. The members of your family didn't match Janine as well, and you had to go like Mike, go more broad?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
It, a lot of people went out to see if they're a match for Janine, right? I went out, a couple of my cousins went out, Janine's family went out, a couple of her friends went out. She's that rare blood type.
Mm.
She planned from the beginning, so I'm like, you know, we don't care. We're going to try anyways, right? I've never, and when she called me from work, she told me I wasn't a match. I lost it. Like I was quiet, I was numb for like a half hour. I sat there on the couch crying. I can't lose my wife. That's how I can't think. I can't lose her. There's nothing I can do. I mean, I have to do something to make sure she's okay, right? It's not even for me, it's for my daughter too. Because my daughter and Tatiana June are very close. I can't get between them at all, right? So that's how close they are. Going through the whole process, Janine's mother had an epiphany. She had a dream, and she said, Janine, I think you should put an ad in the paper. So we put an ad in the paper, and then Janine's cousin put it on Facebook. So one of Janine's cousin's friends from church happened to see the ad, and she said, okay, I could do it. I'm that blood type. And everything started rolling positively. Everybody was happy. Like, I swore we won the lotto max. That's how good I felt when she told me that Christy was a match, right? So what you're going through this whole, it's just emotional. And again, my hands are tied. There's nothing I can do. I can just help put the word out. Had a couple of friends share the ad on Facebook and Instagram to everybody they knew. And Christy happened to come up as a positive match. And then we met Christy. It was like they're soul sisters, how they came together. They're hugging, they're crying. And when we went to do the test, everything worked out perfectly. Like, it was like a 90% match. I think it was a high match. Whatever the range is, say 1 to 10, she's like a 9.5. That's how close she was in a match. So it was just amazing. It was very amazing what we went through. It was like a year or 2 years of trying to find someone to match with Janine. A lot of heartbreaks, a lot of going back and forth to the hospital, calling your friends, calling your family. Oh man, I'm getting emotional right now thinking about it, right? So thank God that Christy came along and was able to match with Janine, and the rest is history.
Amazing.
Yes.
The power of social media, or like you said, newspaper ad.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, other than Leslie, Mike's wife found her donor through that means. Janine found her donor, and then Francesco's side, Trevor donated to somebody he had never met, didn't know. So Mike, I know you said your son-in-law and daughter were crucial in this search. How did they use media and things like that to help find your living donor?
They registered the URL donor for Diane, the number 4, and built a website, set up all sorts of metrics for that. And then our daughter, who is involved as an advisory council to the local town council, she has contact with the media. We met with one of the editors of the local newspaper, and she was a very, very, very compassionate, is a very compassionate person, and wrote up a front page story. And that story was picked up on Facebook. I don't know, there was at least, I think at least 2 or 3 times that we were on the front page sort of updating the story. And the young woman saw it and read it, and via Facebook, and I guess she had been considering living donation, and that was it. We were stunned. It was a relatively short period of time. The website had live links connect to your portal for donors to go through the process of registering. We, for confidentiality reasons, we don't know the numbers, but we're pretty sure there may be as many as 10 people that were willing to donate to Diane. And it was bizarre that none of us could qualify, despite my begging and pleading. We are the same blood type, which seems crazy, but reminded me that, the surgeons reminded me that you're not a walking organ. You are someone we want to protect as well.
Mhm.
And and the same arguments, I felt I'm in good shape and healthy, and obviously would give my life for her. But you're too old. I hear that a lot lately. So my kids both the girls will remind me of that. And I even thought of, could I donate a kidney in exchange for a liver? Someone said that's a bit like, it's an organ that you can, there's dialysis to treat, not to minimize kidney transplants, but liver, they're taking it's a part of the, it's about 75% of the largest organ in your body, and you don't have another one. So they reminded me that my daughter said, you're not giving a kidney, we're not having two parents convalescing at the same time. So that was quickly proven to be a very bad idea, that I should give a kidney in exchange for a liver. And I don't think it works that way, but I was trying everything desperately.
And Francesco, on your side of things, Trevor had no idea where his kidney went or who it went to. Is that right?
Yeah, I think initially too, when I say that like his appointments were during his work schedule, it was out of practicality, and like there were no ill intentions behind it. I just wasn't, I think he didn't think that he would be a match, and he didn't want to come to me with some kind of information until it was more concrete. And also listening to their stories, they all got to meet the recipients and the donors. They got to meet. Whereas also I think in hindsight, maybe that whole numbing feeling I experienced was also because I never got to meet his recipient. Nobody did. His parents didn't, he didn't. And that was just part of the anonymous agreement that they had. So I don't know, thinking back, I think maybe that was also why it just didn't seem real.
Yeah, you couldn't physically see the person that was benefiting from this gift, right? Where was the kidney going? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think in Trevor's case, you're right. He was very lucky. He worked at the hospital where he was getting his tests done and things like that. But I know at that time you were working in a job where there wasn't a lot of employer support. For time off, paid leave, those types of things. So you want to share a little bit about the challenges with that, because I think that's a lot of the reasons why people don't step up to donate. They can't afford to take time off. They don't have jobs that have benefits or whatnot, and the same for caregivers. I mean, they can't take time away from work to care for their loved one because it's financially taxing. So would you be able to share a little bit about how that was for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that I didn't really go to many of the appointments. I do. Sorry, I'm going to digress for a minute. There was one appointment that I do recall going to, and I mentioned, I guess in the past, that I was there for about 3 minutes, and the doctor actually asked me to leave the room. And I'm hoping things have changed since 2013, but I didn't really have the support to ask questions and to inquire about things that didn't make sense. And so with work too, is that I worked at the time I worked in the service industry, and unfortunately as a server and a bartender, we're expendable, and I wasn't given a lot of time off. So post-op, I had, I think, 3 days that I was given off, and those were unpaid. And in the service industry, it's not the hourly wage that matters, it's the tips. And so those 3 days that I was off, I didn't care that I was losing my pay. I was more upset that I was losing the tips that I would have made on those days. And so there was unpaid. There was a financial hardship if I wanted to take weeks off. Whereas he worked for UHN, and he got his entire salary for the 4 weeks that he was off, and then came back unmodified.
And for anybody else, Leslie, I know you took time off work. You had two people to care for at home.
Yeah.
Were you supported to do that? Or?
So I'm an educator, and within my school environment, extremely well supported, like really with everyone, my principal, the staff, even for going for some of the appointments. Some of her appointments were like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And as a teacher, you have to book a half day or a full day. You don't get an in-between kind of situation. So, but, you know, I didn't want to like use up all of my days just with these appointments, because I knew that there's always a potential for more appointments and so on. My staff really rallied around me, and we just switched duties and prep times and all of that. And they just said, you know, leave at 1:30 and just go for your appointment and so on. So I'm very grateful for that. In the larger sort of scheme of things, I had a protocol to follow with the school board for leave of absence. And basically, you know, I was granted the leave of absence. And the way it works is that you take it as unpaid initially. So basically you go on to employment insurance for that time, and then you submit an application to your school board for consideration for a top-up. And so and I did get it, you know, but initially you have that sort of feeling that it's a chance you'll get it or a chance that you may not get it, but you just need to be off for that time. And I did take 9 weeks leave of absence from my school. And so, you know, after the 2-week waiting period for EI, then I was on employment insurance. And at the end of my 9 weeks, my school board topped up my salary and gave me the difference, which was amazing. But I never really knew what I would get, if anything. So there is that element of uncertainty. And I certainly see why, you know, some people feel that maybe they can't afford to do it, because there's no guarantee of what you're going to get. It's just a hope that you'll get it almost. The hard thing for my profession was really, there's so much work involved when you're going on a leave of absence. You have to find your supply teacher, you know, and really there's no one else to do it for you other than yourself. So you're asking around, you know, some people don't want to work for short periods of time. And this was for, you know, considered a short period of time. To me, I thought it was a long period of time, but it's not, because supply teachers can get 3 months, 4 months, you know, rest of the school year. So I did have difficulty finding a supply, but I did find an amazing supply. The other thing was it's hard to let go. And so as a teacher, I was off, but I was not really off. And so I was in constant contact with my co-workers. I was still helping to plan. I wrote the first week of day plans for her. So, you know, my family was saying to me, you're off. Why are you doing all this? And I'm thinking, well, I just want to make sure everything goes well, because everyone's been so kind to me. I want to make sure everything goes well for everybody else. So I think that was a challenge. But yes, it's, you know, the financial part is definitely a concern. And I just took the leap of faith that I would receive some compensation from my school board, and I did. So it worked out great in the end.
That's awesome. And DeRoy, did you have a supportive employer as well? You were working at the time.
I did. At the beginning, I let them know that was happening with Janine, that she's going to go through a transplant very soon. I'm very transparent. So I don't hold nothing back. I just let everything out there. I let faith take over. So if they said no to me, then I go to step 2. But at the time they said no problem, we'll pay you, use your vacation days to take care of your wife. I was very blessed in that sense. So I didn't have that stress of worrying about work. I'm very lucky for that, right? Yeah. So we kept in contact throughout the whole thing, through email or through text or through phone calls here and there. Keep them updated at work. So I had like 2 or 3 weeks off. And then when I went back to work, I went to work part-time. So I work, you know, a couple hours here and there, a couple days a week. So I was able to, you know, go back and forth and taking care of Janine. And plus I had Tatiana was there too, taking care of her mom. And then also her mother, my mother-in-law, Janine's mom, was there too, helping out. So it's like a big family support system. Everybody played the role very well. And we were very blessed. Work-wise, we were okay. I didn't have to worry about finances because my work, I told the workplace early, like Janine's surgery is in March. I told them, I think from January, this was going to happen. So I wasn't like, I didn't want to shock them, like say a week before the surgery.
Yeah.
I give that respect, right? So with that being said, again, I was very lucky. I was very thankful to them. I was able to go back and forth with work. I still use my vacation days. I didn't miss a heartbeat. And Janine was good. And Janine was well taken care of at the time too.
Good. Good. And Mike, you were self-employed when Diane got sick? So a little bit, you were the employer.
I was the employer, but I was in the point of reaching an agreement to wind up the business and retire. So that it maybe accelerated it a bit, but we feel very fortunate about that part of it. And even in COVID, that financially, there's really been very little impact other than the cost of Diane's medications. But yeah, I feel for people that have had to take time off and have lost wages. And you and I had some conversations about this, but I think in our donor's situation, she worked for a very, very enlightened company, and I think she went to ask for a leave of absence, and they said, no, you're going to get full pay for this. So I think they obviously, as I said, very enlightened company. So there are in our situation, it was good all around financially. There really wasn't fortunately any financial hardship for us or the donor. But I know there are people that it must be a struggle if you've got a young family. And there's one advantage of
depend on the, that's okay. It seems to depend on what type of job you have too, right?
Exactly. And certainly one advantage of this happening later in life for us, and as opposed to all the other situations where they're much younger people, we as I said, didn't have the financial hardship of the employment issues to manage through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to hear that employers are supporting this, both from the side of say Leslie and DeRoy as the caregiver, Trevor, Francesca's partner, and then you said your donor was heavily supported through their employer as well, which is great. I was just going to go back to I've heard throughout people talk about the supports. I heard Leslie mention faith as playing a big role. DeRoy was saying how he had a great support system, his mother-in-law and that kind of thing. What got you guys really through those tough times? What were things that were super helpful that you'd sit back now and say, I really don't know how I would have done it without it. And Leslie, I'll go to you first, because you did mention the role of faith and how that played a big part in your whole family's journey, I would think.
Yeah, so faith has always been huge in my family, and we identify as Roman Catholic. And I think for me, when this has been a 10-year journey, so it wasn't a surprise or something that just came up in a few years. So I always knew we were coming to this. And as I watched Alicia grow in faith, and also my daughter Danielle and the whole family too, as we grew in our sort of acceptance of the situation and our understanding that she would be protected, because that's from the faith perspective that things would go well and she would be watched over, that we learned to surrender the process to God. And so I think for me, I drew my strength from seeing how accepting Alicia was, but she had drawn her strength from her faith, and I also drew it from faith. So that was huge. That was probably my biggest support, if you like, outside of the daily support, which was everyone else around me. And I'm very, very blessed to be part of such a great school community who had journeyed with me for these 10 years, because I've been there that long. So they've known about this whole story from the time it first happened. And so, you know, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, the whole village came together in so many different ways, from a 24-hour prayer wheel on the day of their session, on the day of their surgery. So some friends organized prayers from midnight till midnight on the day of their surgery. So we always knew that they were prayed for all through the day by someone around the world. And so that was really important. And just in the practical day-to-day things, because I had one child, or one young adult, I should say, in hospital, both in hospital initially, but then Alicia was there longer. My daughter Danielle came home. So I had this sort of thing where I had one family member recovering at home and one family member still in the hospital. And so my neighbors all rallied around. They would come in and check on Danielle, get her food ready. So, you know, people dropped off food for us for almost 3 weeks post surgery. So I never had to like turn on the stove. And you know, so that was huge. You know, just different ways, calling, offering support, and asking how the girls were doing, stopping by, because COVID hadn't shut us down just yet. So we had friends who came by and really supported the girls, and gave them courage and energy, really rejuvenated them, especially seeing their friends. So I think it was an all around, but faith was definitely the greatest support for me. Yeah.
And the community of everything, school,
Yes.
neighbors, faith community, all around.
Yes.
That's great. And DeRoy, it sounded like you had a lot of family and friends that were circling you guys as well. What was your biggest support?
Oh, definitely. Faith for sure. Definitely. That is one thing. I think the most powerful thing we have in this world is love. I seen a lot of love when Jean's going through her journey of getting a new transplant. It's one of those things that you have to, like Leslie said, it's something like when you feel the faith, you understand the faith. You see faith is real in these situations, right? Her mom was very powerful, her prayers. Tatiana, oh my gosh, she prayed every morning for her mother. Even before we ate dinner, she always prayed for her mother. And everything, prayer was constant in our household, within our family, and within our support system. It was just my mom and her friend. They would have like a prayer group at nighttime. They would pray all night for everybody. Same thing like that on Friday night. That was their thing. Her sister, her father. Like, it was just amazing to see how much support and how faith and how love is so powerful in this world. If we all have love, we can get through anything. I believe faith and love go hand in hand. And just witnessing this for, say, like 4 or 5 months when it was coming down to crunch time, just witnessing how powerful faith and love were at the same time, is just amazing to see. It made our life a lot easier. 2 years later, we're still here. We're still smiling, having fun every day, arguing like, you know, married couples do. And then you make up for like 5 minutes later. But it's a great journey. And again, faith is so powerful. Faith and love, definitely, for sure.
Absolutely. Oh, that gives me the warm and fuzzies. Yeah, absolutely. Love and being surrounded by lots of love and lots of positivity. Now, I know, Mike, you guys had a whole community rallying around you guys in the area you live, but it was COVID, in the midst of COVID, when all this happened. So, you know, how did that impact you guys? Were you feeling isolated, or were people still able to rally around you despite all that was going on in the world at that time?
Yeah, the support from family was unwavering, but it certainly made it a mystery. It was up and down in terms of you know, being hopeful, and then all of a sudden the hospitals are closed and there's no surgeries, and things were changing rapidly, and so it complicated things in terms of the unknown. And there's enough unknowns, as you know, going through the whole process of, will we find a donor, and will he or she be a match, and a proper match, and all the other unknown conditions that you're working through. But then this threw another curveball at it. And then Diane, ultimately, when the surgery decided to go ahead and had approvals to do so, then she was alone as well, which was a difficult time for her to be alone in the hospital. And it all seems to have gone by, quickly in retrospect. It's probably more complex now post-surgery, because we're being ultra cautious with her being high risk, and any kind of infection could be disastrous. So I think the impact post-surgery, post-transplant, has probably been greater than before. We just really had to follow the rules and do what we were told, because you're not going to, we're not allowed to do surgery. And Diane, Diane never became hopeless, but sort of threw up her arms and said, okay, well, there's nothing we can do. We continue the battle. And we were still optimistic that we had someone. We knew we had one, I'll say, a B donor. She was not ideal. She was a friend, friend of a very good friend. But so we had someone that I think was, as I said, in the bullpen, if Diane's life was, she was in a life-threatening position. So we felt positive about that, but we also were confident that we were going to probably find someone that was a better match. So we just sort of hunkered down and said, we're going to continue to do everything we can. And when the surgery can come about, it will. And it really seemed to happen pretty quickly. That first it was, no surgeries at all, then no elective surgeries, and then urgent. And I think she qualified as being urgent and went ahead. And I think you said she was the first, or one of the first, transplants during COVID. And as it turned out, the hospitals, I think, have been one of the safest places to be. As long as you keep all those visitors, as long as you keep all the visitors away.
Keep all those caregivers and family members.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, because she would have had her surgery in April. So yeah, when we shut everything down in March, it would have been one of the first.
One of the first.
Yeah. So, and Francesco, for you, I know where you weren't actually caring for Trevor before his surgery as well. After surgery, with the recovery, was it family and friends? I think you had told me Trevor's family was very supportive in providing care and things like that when you couldn't.
Yeah, I feel like I feel so, I don't know, like I don't belong in this group. Everyone has like these positive stories, and mine is just, I feel like it's lacking a lot. When it comes to, like, again, the appointment aspect, I wasn't really included or invited, and so I didn't really have support there, and I didn't have the ability to really process or comprehend what was about to transpire. And like, I'm from a small town 2 hours outside of Toronto. He's from a small town 2 hours outside of Toronto. So we don't have family here outside of our friends. So who didn't really know much about it. So post-op, again, I had no idea how to care for him, and I wasn't able to take the time off. So I actually had to ship him to his mother, who lives in St. Thomas and is a retired nurse. So we had a lot of support from his family, because they stepped up, and for the first couple weeks they took care of him. And then he came back to the city, and between working and whatnot, I did my best to help care for him. But I think whether you believe in God or the cosmos or the collective or the higher power, whatever you believe in, I mean, I didn't have any negative feelings, again, towards his recovery process or the surgery in itself. It was very much, it's as if I knew everything was going to be fine. So I think that that was also part of that, I guess, the support and what kind of brought us both through it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a journey that I don't think any of us can do alone. So, you know, rallying on whether, you know, it's a faith community, a work community, your neighbors, people in your area, family, whatnot, is crucial. But I think Francesca raises a good point in, you know, we talked a lot about all the positives that people are experiencing, but let's be honest, everything is not always rosy and easy, and you know, there's no complications, no bumps, no hiccups along the road. And I think, Francesca, you've shared some of the things, you know, feeling, you know, maybe like there wasn't a support for caregivers, or not being in on all the knowledge and what's going on. Anybody else have any, you know, things that were challenging, you know, areas that were, you know, frustrating, stressful, you know, really crappy things that happen? And I can totally relate to Francesco's point. I came here to Toronto from Newfoundland, so that whole piece of not having your family close by, my family was miles and miles away, and really, prior to meeting my husband, I had never stepped foot inside of a hospital before. So now you're strapped with caring for someone who's very, very ill, and you know, limited knowledge. DeRoy, anything that was a, you know, very stressful or very concerning or very frustrating piece for you?
One thing I really noticed that Jean had to change her diet. There's certain foods she couldn't eat no more. We loved eggs and bacon on a Saturday morning. No more eggs, right? There's certain things she just can't eat no more. And it's like something she really loves too, right? She enjoyed making eggs every Saturday morning for breakfast. You know, a long week of work, Saturday's a big thing for us in our household, right? So the eating aspect was very alarming, because there's a certain thing you just can't eat no more. Like, you can't even get a milkshake from McDonald's. Just even go to like some certain restaurants we couldn't eat no more because of the kidney transplant, right? It wasn't frustrating as much. This is concerning, because, you know, you want to see your spouse or your family member eat, right? But apart from that, I mean, it's a big thing, but we got over it, because Janine's a very studious young lady. She does lots of research, so she found food that she could eat, and she couldn't eat no more. But other than that, it was okay. It could have been better, but you know what? I'm not a beggar or a chooser. I'm grateful, and the fact that she's still here and she's still rambunctious and loud and always laughing as she is right now, I'm grateful for that.
And she's still arguing with you, right?
Of course, every day, every day. It's all love though. Like, you know, we argue over like little stuff like music and sports and Mississauga and Toronto, like stuff like that we argue about, right? Just like a competition thing. But other than that, we're okay.
Yeah, normal husband and wife kind of stuff.
Pretty much, yes.
And what about you, Leslie? Anything that was super challenging or very frustrating or stressful in your journey?
Similar to what DeRoy said, Alicia has also had, well, she's had them for 10 years. She's had dietary challenges and things she can or cannot eat. But on the night before the surgery, we checked into the hospital, and one of the nurses on the transplant unit said, that we could go out for lunch dinner as a family. Is like the last supper kind of thing. And so she said, "Where are you going?" And we said, we're not sure. And she said, "Well, I think you can't eat sushi anymore." And we said, "Really? Post-transplant, no sushi?" And she said, I think no. So we raced out and went and had the biggest sushi dinner we could have, knowing that she can't eat it anymore. So probably more the sashimi. So food is definitely, you know, something that everyone loves and wants. And she's had dietary challenges and has a few additional ones now post-transplant. So definitely she has to watch her diet. That's a challenge. I think during the recovery, pain management was, you know, something that was a challenge, because I had both girls who were managing pain at different levels, but at the beginning, high for both. And so, you know, I had to be very careful about the meds, make sure I was always supervising their meds, because they are adults as well. But we had a good system in place, and they were really excellent. They were probably the best patients you could ever hope to have. They tried to do many things themselves, and when they struggled, they asked for help. Alicia had a lot of pain at the beginning. She also had a slow healing wound, which required some intervention, and so we had a nurse coming in. So those were sort of temporary small challenges, but at the time they were significant for our family. But in the grand scheme of things, you know, we were able to just deal with each one as it came up. And just the weather wasn't really an issue. Going back and forth to the hospital was great, and the hospital was just amazing. I cannot say enough good things about Toronto General, just in the way they handled everything, pre-transplant, post-transplant. So our challenges were just really managing pain, diet a little bit, and finding things that the girls could eat that, because they really did suffer from sort of a loss of appetite post-surgery, had difficulty finding things that they liked to eat. Those were just sort of small challenges, I would say, yeah.
Absolutely. And Mike, I know COVID probably was the biggest challenge for you guys, but anything else that that stood out to be really frustrating, stressful, difficult to deal with?
On the personal side, once Diane came home, and we just have the one granddaughter, and I think other than our donor, she probably played the biggest role in saving Diane's life, because you know, Diane just lives for her, and she could come over, but she couldn't come in the house due to COVID. And so we would put her, we put a swing in the backyard so that we could see her from the back, from the window, but we couldn't get together. And of course, just a little 2-year-old, she can't understand why Mimi and Papa can't pick her up and hug her as she was used to. And that was very, very difficult for both of us. But that was over fairly quickly. And I think in a way we've now kind of banked that time, and we're her primary playmates now, because she can't be with other kids. So we see her almost every day for a few hours, usually in the morning for 2 or 3 hours. And it's now that we're in our bubble, it's wonderful. But that was extremely hard on Diane, the whole family, because she wanted to be with her only grandchild. And I think the other thing that from the whole process that we found difficult was the not knowing where we were in the whole process. And that's, no one's to blame for that. There are confidentiality issues, but everyone had a job, and we were very much focused on making this happen, and pulled our family together. And we had the opportunity through the one newspaper publisher to reach out to a broader audience. So we needed to know where we were in the process before we used that option up, because in the news media, you're a story for about 30 seconds and you better use it wisely. So we wanted to do that if we were going to go, to a provincial program or something broader than just our local market. We wanted to know when was the right time to do that. We didn't want to flood, the Living Donation Center with potential donors, but yet we didn't want to get to the point where Diane was so ill that we were beyond hope. So that was kind of frustrating, and I don't know what the solution is for that. It's very hard to know, where you are in this whole process, where you are on the list, because it's not the kind of list where someone goes off the top of the list and you move up a place, as you know. Someone could come into the list and have a higher MELD score tomorrow and gets a liver before someone that's been on the list for 10 years. So the living donation thing was the only option for us, we felt, and not knowing where we were in terms of donors. But it's a very difficult situation with confidentiality to get around. But I'm hopeful that the future will bring, and I think the whole program is looking into better ways to keep recipients and donors informed of the process.
Yeah, it's definitely a fine line to try and balance. keeping people informed, respecting confidentiality. You know, the whole donor process itself is supposed to be anonymous and confidential. So yeah, if there's ways that we can improve it, I think that would be a good thing for everybody, donor, recipient, family, the whole thing. I'm just watching time. I'll ask you guys one final question, kind of to wrap up. So I'm thinking about there might be some people out there who's watching today, or might be tuning in, and they're just about to start their journey. Maybe their loved one is newly ill. Maybe their loved one is thinking about living donation, but is not sure if they want to go ahead and be a donor. So you guys are all experts in this arena, having cared for spouses, children, partners, loved ones. What words of wisdom or advice would you give someone who's starting out in this journey? And I'm gonna get Francesco to take it off, lead it as a caregiver of a donor, because I think sometimes we forget that the donor needs somebody to take care of them too. So, so if someone was in your shoes, Francesco, today, what words of advice would you give them?
I also, if I could look back and talk to my younger self.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Be more assertive. I should have just asked the questions anyways, and I should have forced myself to, be more involved with the appointments. But I think too, and something I've just learned in life as I've gotten older, is that in these situations, I think especially listening to Leslie, Michael, and Roy's stories as caregivers of recipients, is certain things are out of our control. And I think you just have to practice surrendering and hoping that, and leaning on your faith and your family and for support. And I think that's something I would have done more of as well, especially like just to cater to like my mental health and his mental health.
Absolutely, because the mental piece is just as important as the physical piece, and that whole piece of being an advocate and asking questions and being part of the whole journey. Yeah, I think that's really great. How about you, Leslie? Any words of wisdom for someone in your situation?
I would say, be prepared, and do as much research as you can, like Michael, Francesco, DeRoy was saying, but also ask lots of questions. Like when you go to appointments, don't be afraid. I used to make notes beforehand and just ask my questions, because any question that I would ask is nothing new to the doctors or the nurses. And so I would make notes as they talked, and then I would bring it home, talk with my family about it, and so on. So I think just sharing the information puts everyone on the same page. And Alicia, I went to more appointments with her. I only went to one with Danielle. So there was there was a difference in the donor experience and the recipient experience. With Danielle, it was more of a closed experience with her. And we were only involved sort of at some point in the process. And I think part of that is to protect the donor, especially in a familial situation, because the transplant clinic doesn't want her to feel pressure from her family to go ahead and do this. And so there was limited information that was shared with us until maybe halfway through the process. But with Alicia, of course, I went to all of her appointments. So I felt more involved on the recipient side than on the donor side. So definitely I see that even in Francesco's story. And I think there is a reason for that, but it does make for a different experience entirely. Yeah. And so I think, maybe just possibly involving the family a little bit more for the donor side might be helpful, because I had a lot of questions when I found out that my daughter had applied. I had a lot of questions like, when's your next appointment and how did it go? And she was always pretty much low key about it. And I think I think part of that was upon advice from the doctors and nurses who saw her, who said, you know, like, find people outside of your family who can support you and who can advise you, because you don't want to feel that familial pressure. And I can certainly understand that, but then it did make for a different experience. But I think asking a lot of questions, being prepared, taking notes, and most of all, just staying positive, because it is a long journey. Michael said, I think it was a couple of years his wife was on the list. For us, it was actually a very quick journey. It was almost too quick. Like, we almost weren't ready for it, because in October she went to the transplant clinic, and by December we were ready to pick a date. We picked a date 2 months after her first appointment. So in that regard, like, we had to be emotionally ready as well. So being prepared, being ready, and having a lot of support around you is probably the best way to sort of embark on this journey. And also just ask lots and lots of questions. I really did all the way through. Yeah. So
Yeah, you can never know too much.
yeah.
Yeah. And how about you, Mike? Words of wisdom?
Echo exactly what's been said. Get involved. I spent my entire career in a segment of healthcare, and you have to manage your own healthcare situation. I know you and I've talked about this before, and you said that unfortunately a lot of people suffer in silence. Get involved and make sure you're managing if you're the caregiver, or it's your own case, manage your healthcare. Our healthcare system is becoming highly, highly specialized, and there are multiple professionals, and it's no doubt getting better, but there are all kinds of opportunities for breakdowns and loss of information, and I'm sure we've all lived through that. So get involved and stay involved and ask lots of questions. And I think the other thing is to make a lot of noise. If in the case of donation, make as much noise about it as you can. I think it's very difficult to sit down with someone face to face and ask them to give, to donate an organ. And because ultimately, if the answer is no, then the question why comes up. And that's a very difficult question to ask someone. You're asking them to reveal possibly highly confidential healthcare information. So, you know, there may be a mental health issue why they don't want to donate. There may be employment issues where their career will be profoundly affected, their family. So, but the way to get around that, I think, is to make as much noise as you possibly can and get the word out there, because you will find someone. There are people that want to give and donate because they want to do it for themselves. And it may not be a family member. It could be someone, like in our case, someone we didn't know. And that's the way to accomplish it without putting family members or friends in very difficult situations to have to say why they can't donate. Those are unfair questions. I think we have to respect people that say no as well, because they have valid reasons, and certainly the ones that do donate are heroes, and they should be. But I guess that all comes together in the culmination of get involved, make as much noise as you can. There's no embarrassment in asking for help, and you're trying to save the life of someone you love very, very much.
Excellent points. Make noise, ask questions, educate yourself. DeRoy, you get the last word. Any words of wisdom?
Last words of wisdom. Everything Leslie and Michael and Francesco said, I agree 100%. It's all about support, being positive, not afraid to ask questions. My motto is no such thing as a dumb question. I believe it 100%, right? Because not everybody knows everything. It's okay to ask questions. Rely on your support system, rely on your faith, and definitely love, right? Because once you have all those in place, you'll get through anything, in my opinion, right? So it's definitely a process. You know, the saying, Rome wasn't built in one day. Everything has its time. And within that time, it's got to follow the lead and just be patient with it, and you should be okay at the end of the day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all, Leslie, Mike, DeRoy, Francesco. You know, it's been a pleasure to sit with you guys this afternoon and talk about something that's obviously very near and dear to my heart, and to sit with such amazing colleagues and friends and share our experiences has been amazing. I hope that those who are tuning in and listening learned something. I know I certainly did. You know, I think just to wrap it up, the points that were made, you know, faith, love, positivity, strength. And I know you guys, you know, talked about a lot of the ways that you found that, but I'm sure people online and me looking at you guys, you emulate all those characteristics. So hats off to you. You know, coming from a healthcare provider position, we would never be able to do it without the support people. You play a very, very crucial role in the healthcare system. So thank you. I wish you all the best, and I hope that your loved ones continues to do well. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. It's
Thanks so much.
nice to meet everyone.